Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Jeremy Leffler, and I work in the Policy Office at the National Science Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you today to the Spring 2021 NSF Virtual Grants Conference. So I'm going to turn this session over now to our presenters who are going to cover the proposal preparation process at the National Science Foundation.
Well, welcome everyone to the Virtual Grants Conference Proposal Preparation Session. I'm delighted to be here with my colleagues to present to you the proposal preparation session. My name is Jean Feldman. I'm head of the Policy Office in the Division of Institution and Award Support in the Office of Budget Finance and Award Management. I am joined by two esteemed colleagues from our research directorates, Stefan Robila. He's a program director in the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure in the Directorate for Computer and Information Science and Engineering, as well as Jennifer Wade. Jennifer is the acting section head in the Division of Earth Sciences in the Directorate for Geosciences. We have a wealth of information to provide to all of you as part of this session. And what we intend to cover is finding funding opportunities, a bit about the NSF Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, which is the backbone of our proposal and award process, the types of proposal submissions that you can submit to NSF, the sections of an NSF proposal, postdoc mentoring plans, and data management plans. We hope that this will be an interactive session when we actually go through and present this material to you. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to the next set of slides.
All right, so first let's talk about how to find funding opportunities. So you do some research, and where does your research fit within NSF? And there are a couple of ways to do that. First, if you go to the NSF website, you can search by research area, and you can also search here by funding. Under the funding menu, you can find all kinds of things about policies and procedures, how a merit review works. You can find the proposal guide, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and also specific funding opportunities for where you might be in career stage, graduate students, K-12 education, all of that. You can also find funding opportunities if you scroll further down the webpage, and there's a little search box where you can search by keyword or just view by program area. So for instance, I'm in geosciences. I can look at everything that's available within geo. Another way, if you're still kind of not sure where you might fit, is to look at what's been funded before. So if you go to the awards tab on the NSF website, you'll come to this box where you can search for a keyword. So say you work on Mount Rainier. You can search here, see who else has worked in that area and what we funded in that area. You can search by discipline type, you can search by PI name, all kinds of things are possible here. And then this will help you narrow down, what programs have funded the kind of work you do in the past. Of course, you can also find funding opportunities beyond NSF if you go to grants.gov and use the search feature there. So here, you can do the same kind of search, but you might find opportunities at other agencies, not just the NSF. So let's talk about the Proposal and Award Procedures, Policies and Procedures Guide, which we call the PAPG. So this is the sort of the main guiding document for anyone who's submitting to NSF or has an award from NSF. And it serves both, it's for you, the community, and it's also for us as NSF staff. So part one is that proposal preparation and submission guideline piece, and part two has all the guidelines for award administration. So the PAPG, it provides guidance for preparation and submission. It tells you about what the merit review criteria are. So what are the criteria by which your proposal is going to be reviewed? And within that, it might tell you the reasons why a proposal might not be accepted or it might get returned without review. And it tells you the process for withdrawing a proposal, what happens when a proposal is declined. And it really gives all the policies to help you manage and monitor the award administration of your grant or your cooperative agreement for both PIs and university administrators. So there are a bunch of different kinds of funding opportunities that you might be submitting a proposal to. So program descriptions and program announcements, the only guidance you really need to know are what's in that announcement and then what's in the PAPG. Follow those instructions. A program solicitation is a little bit different. So you have to follow the guidance of the PAPG, but the solicitation may also have extra pieces of guidance or extra documents that you need to include. It might include specific information about eligibility, either for you or your institution. So you want to make sure if you're submitting to a solicitation that you understand not just the PAPG, but also the guidance within that solicitation. And then there are these things called Dear Colleague letters, which are sort of notifications of special opportunities, which might also have special conditions for how to submit and who can submit. So overall, when you're looking at a program announcement or a solicitation, you want to make sure that you fit the goal of the program. So is your work within the purview of this program? Are you eligible as an individual? Is your institution eligible? And then what are the special requirements that might exist there? And I'll pass it off to Stefan.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. So next, let's talk a little bit about the information that is available to you as you are looking at a specific solicitation. And the slide that you have in front of you presents an example of a standard solicitation. It's the NSF includes, and you have, we are famous for our acronyms. But in addition to that, I would point to you the program solicitation number. And the number is important because it allows us within NSF to quickly identify the specific funding opportunity, and also allows us to guide the discussion. It also allows us to keep track of the proposals and so on. The other thing that is important when you are looking at the sample cover page of a solicitation is to look at which offices, divisions, or directorates provide support through funding for this opportunity. So in this case, you see pretty much every directorate within the NSF participates in NSF includes, but in other cases, you may see fewer directorates, and in some cases, you may see specific divisions within the directorates participating. So not all organizations may be participating. The other important aspect of solicitation is the total funding amount and the number of awards that are expected to be made under the solicitation. So every solicitation would include this section under the heading award information. And the first part would include an estimated number of awards. In this case, it's 1 to 3. And in addition to that, anticipated funding amount, in this case, $8.5 million for up to 1 to 3 awards. Many solicitation may have slightly different language. They may provide a breakdown in the different type of projects. So for example, I'm a part of a program called Cyber Infrastructure for Sustained Scientific Innovation, or CSSI. And in that solicitation, we have different types of projects, small projects and large projects. So in that case, the number of awards may be broken down into type of projects, and even the funding may be broken down under the different types of projects. This is, I have just mentioned that I'm part of a solicitation. This is extremely important for the one that I mentioned, but it is also, again, a section that you will see in every cover page for the solicitation, and that relates to the eligibility information. And here, eligibility deals with multiple aspects. It deals with the type of organizations that can submit proposals. It deals with the type of individuals who can serve as PIs for the proposals. And in some cases, it may deal with the number of proposals that somebody can be part of. So you have here examples that are specific to the include solicitation. An important aspect that we get asked a lot by the PIs is when could they submit proposals, and this relates to the deadlines. And I like this slide because the first thing that we tell you is that we have many programs that have no deadlines, meaning that proposals may be submitted at any time throughout the years. But there are other programs. We continue to have programs with diverse types of deadlines and target dates. And for the next couple of slides, I will talk about the target dates and the deadline dates. So with respect to the target dates, if you're looking at PAPG, you will see that the definition for target date is a date after which proposals continue to be accepted, although a delay may be encountered, or you may miss a particular panel or a committee meeting. Compared to that, a deadline is very clear. It is a date and a time, usually 5 p.m. submitters local time, and after which proposals will not be accepted. And if you manage to submit it, then it will be returned without review. The deadline date will be waived only in extenuating circumstances, and if you are interested in what extenuating circumstances means, deviation may be authorized in accordance to a specific chapter, Chapter 2A in PAPG. Submission window. A submission window basically also gives you a start from the, a date from which proposals are accepted for a specific solicitation. So apart from CSSI, I am also part of the Computer Information Science and Engineering, or SCIENCE, core research program. And if you are looking at that specific solicitation, you will see that apart from the different types of projects that we accept, we also have different types of submission windows. So for example, for the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure Core Research Program that I'm directly part of, the submission window is 2 weeks. It starts 2 weeks before the deadline. But once the submission window time passes, then the target date or the deadline becomes really nothing else but the time by which you can submit proposals. So in addition to the date, in addition to who can submit proposals, there are other things that you may want to be aware before you submit a proposal. And in some specific solicitations, we request that a letter of intent be submitted before the proposal. And again, if you are referring to PAPG, you will see the purpose of the letter of intent. It's not to review your idea before the full proposal, but to allow us within NSF to prepare for the full proposal, for the submission, in terms of identifying reviewers, in terms of identifying specific areas. And again, the point is not here to review something small and discourage you from submitting, but to prepare us better. However, I will caution you that if a letter of intent is required and you do not submit the letter of intent, you will not be allowed to submit the full proposal. Compared to that, in some solicitations, however, we have preliminary proposals, and again, they are sometimes required, sometimes they are optional. And the purpose for requesting a preliminary proposal first is to reduce the proposal's burden. So usually pre-proposals are smaller, and I will refer again to programs within SCIENCE. We have the Expeditions program. This is one of the largest programs in terms of the funding and duration for SCIENCE. And here we ask the teams to consider a pre-proposal. In fact, we require a pre-proposal that is much smaller, that is provides less constraints, and allows size and allows us to understand the specific topic and the nature of the project, and at the same time avoids allows the PIs to spend less time on preparing it in case their idea is really totally off. So again, there's reduction of the burden on the proposer. It increases the overall quality of the full submission, because in the case of the Expeditions, we review the proposals with the pre-proposals with external reviewers, and we provide feedback to the PI. So if a proposal is invited, if a pre-proposal is invited for a full proposal, not only that they receive a note saying you are invited, but they also receive constructive feedback on how to improve the proposal. If a pre-proposal is not invited, they also receive full reviews to the pre-proposals. And finally, there is also the internal reason assisting the NSF program staff to manage the review process and the selection of the reviewer. So that remains the same. So I will mention that again, depending on the solicitation, this may be required or optional. If it is required, again, you must submit it before you can submit a full proposal. Next slide, and I think my part is done.
Okay, so next let's talk about some of the parts of a proposal that will come in. So some proposal documents are really for NSF staff only. They're not going to be provided to reviewers. And these might be letters of authorization that let you deviate from proposal requirements, list of suggested reviewers or reviewers not to include, proprietary or privileged information. Some proposals require patent info or other things that you may not want shared widely, various proposal certifications, and information about collaborators and other affiliations that, again, don't get shared but are for NSF staff to use to move the merit review process forward. So let's talk about the required sections of a proposal that comes in. We're going to step through each of these items from the cover sheet at the top of the proposal through all of these sections. And each of these is important because if you don't include these required sections in your proposal, it's not going to be accepted by research.gov or Fastlane and will just be returned to you and you won't be allowed to submit. So the cover sheet is the first thing that we see in a proposal. A lot of these boxes are filled in electronically once you log in to start the proposal building process. But this tells us, what are you submitting to? Are you submitting to the PAPG or to a solicitation? What's the program? What's the date you're submitting? Who are you? What institution are you at? How much money are you asking for? All of these kind of basic pieces of information. And then your proposal is going to get assigned a number that will live up in that upper right corner. Next comes the project summary. So this is a one-page document, and there are boxes for a summary of the intellectual merit, summary of the broader impacts, and an overview. And it's important that you have each of these pieces filled in. If your project summary has some special characters, this happens a lot in math or engineering, then you need to upload this as a separate PDF document. Okay, and then comes the project description. And this is the bulk of the proposal, right? So for the majority probably of proposals that come in, this is the 15-page description of what you want to do, why you want to do it, how you're going to do it, how you'll know if you're successful, and then what benefits to science and society will come if your project is successful. And it's important that within this, on your project summary, you had your one paragraph of broader impacts. There needs to be a separate section within your project description narrative that also describes the broader impacts. And I can tell you from experience, that section within your proposal should not just be a copy paste of that broader impacts paragraph that's in your project summary. This is where you should expand on the details, talk about your mentoring plans, your outreach plans, whatever your broader impacts are. This is where you go into detail because remember, the merit review process evaluates both the intellectual merit and the broader impacts. So the project description is your place to really lay out what you want to do. Of course, you need a references cited section. This is required. And they'll look different depending on which field you're in, right? The references cited should follow whatever the accepted scholarly practices are within your discipline. So references cited in engineering may look pretty different from one in biology, but it should be correct for whatever field you're in. And then the biographical sketches are the next section of a proposal. And these are required just for the senior project personnel. They should not be more than 2 pages in length per person. And you need to follow an NSF approved format for all of these. That's really important and has been updated this year. And I'll pass it off.
Okay, I'd like to make one more quick comment about the biographical sketch component of an NSF proposal before we move on. Every section of an NSF proposal, when you look at our merit review criterion, has what we're asking each reviewer to consider about particular aspects of a proposal. And for the biographical sketches, it's really how well qualified is the individual or team to carry out the research as proposed. That's what we're asking a reviewer to look at. And so we get questions from senior personnel who say, well, tell me what would be the right things to put in there. There are sections on the appointments and on products and on synergistic activities. And our response to you is you should be putting in the biographical sketch. Obviously, there are required pieces, like your all of your appointments. But this is really when you're getting to your products or your synergistic activities, you really should be identifying those aspects that you believe makes the best case for why you are qualified to do this particular project. So we get lots of questions daily into policy@nsf.gov. And so I just wanted to emphasize that particular point, that focus on those things in the synergistic activities and the product section that makes the best case that you could carry out this research. Now we're going to move on to the budget section of a proposal. And I'm actually covering a few sections together. The budget section, facilities, equipment, and other resources, and current and pending support. The budget section and the facilities, equipment, and other resources section together helps answer the question of whether there is sufficient resources to carry out the project as proposed. And so what you see on this slide is the actual NSF budget format that we are asking you to use to identify what it is that you're asking for funding for NSF for. What are all of these particular items? You must use this format, and each proposal has to have a budget for each year that you are requesting funding. And it should be no more. You get a budget justification to go along with this, and you get up to 5 pages for your institution to justify all of the items that you've requested funding for. And I will tell you right up front that the mistake that many folks make is not spending the time justifying. They feel like, well, they should understand what I want to use these funds for. No, if you're asking for funding from NSF, you should be justifying, telling that reviewer, because remember, these are program officers and reviewers who ultimately will look at this and they're going to say, okay, if I were doing that research, are these the kind of items that I would like to include, or I would include in that proposal as well? If you have any subawards identified for this particular proposal, they also can include a separate budget justification of no more than 5 pages for each of the subawards. So now we're going to talk about the budgetary guidelines and a little bit more information about level setting, context setting. So when you go in there, the PAP guide has a lot of information about each of the budget categories, what our expectations are, when you would be using that budget category. But the things that really, after doing 50 of these grants conferences, that I would like to emphasize is that people ask all the time of program officers, how much should I include? What should I include? You should be including what you need, what you would need to carry out this research. So the costs should be realistic. They should be reasonable for what it is you're trying to achieve in this particular proposal. Again, I've identified the importance of the justification and establishing why you need that, why you need those particular funds for that proposal. We've also talked about the program solicitation, and a program solicitation may modify the guidance in the PAP guide, and in particular, it may tell you, for example, the types of costs that would be most appropriate for a proposal coming in for that solicitation. So if you are submitting to a solicitation, make sure you look at that particular section of the solicitation to ensure that it does not have specific guidance, if you will, for what types of costs would be appropriate. So in the PAP guide, we also go through what those eligible costs are. Personnel. NSF does have a slightly different compensation policy than other federal agencies, so it's important that you understand, and the PAP guide goes through this, that NSF's general policy is that we limit the salary compensation for any individual identified as senior personnel to no more than 2 months of their regular salary in any 1 year across all NSF funded grants. So we will fund up to 2 months. The reality is we sometimes fund less. And it's also important for folks to realize that you can ask for more. If you ask for more, you would have then that 2 months across all your NSF funded grants, you would need to justify in a very serious way why you need that extra compensation beyond those 2 months. And if the program officer allows that and includes it in the approved budget, then you have the approval that you need for NSF. There are different rules associated with after an award is made. You can re-budget any of the costs in this personnel category, but it cannot constitute a change in objective or scope. We also allow equipment, and some of that may be obviously dictated by the kind of research that you end up doing. Travel, participant support. Now, that is one category that is probably worth emphasizing the importance of, because it is not something that folks necessarily understand. So the participant support budget category refers to direct costs for items such as stipend or subsistence allowance, travel, registration fees, paid to or on behalf of participants or trainees in connection with NSF-sponsored conferences or training projects. So that is what we mean by participant support costs. So I would strongly encourage you to, if you plan on including that category in your budget, you may want to talk to your Office of Sponsored Projects to make sure that you have correctly understood what that particular budget category is to be used for, and the types of costs that you have requested compensation. We obviously also allow other direct costs, and we identify some of the categories here that are actually included that would be appropriate other direct costs depending on the nature of what you plan to do. NSF's cost sharing policy. Well, I don't want to overemphasize this. NSF has a cost sharing policy which prohibits the inclusion of voluntary committed cost sharing in solicited or unsolicited proposals, and that the only exceptions are whether the foundation actually includes it as a requirement in the actual solicitation. And there are only a whopping 6 programs across NSF that require mandatory cost sharing. And so obviously you would want to look at the solicitation to see if your program is one of those 6. What I would like to emphasize, though, and that's what's most important on this slide, is the last bullet. Organizations may, at their own discretion, contribute any amount of voluntary uncommitted cost sharing to NSF-sponsored projects. And what that means is that if your institution, for example, an easy example that we often give is a particular faculty member is not requesting salary. And so the individual would not put any amount of funding on the budget, but they would tell us what they were doing with their time and facilities, equipment, and other resources that I'm about to talk about next. That is, when you put that there, that is not a violation of NSF's cost sharing policy. To be voluntary committed cost sharing, it must be on the budget. So just remember that is one way to indicate whether it is something that is voluntary committed or voluntary uncommitted. And for voluntary uncommitted, you can put that in your proposal without having it be held against you. So now I'm going to talk about facilities, equipment, and other resources. And it's important to understand what I just mentioned, that this section plus equipment plus the budget section are all of the resources, whether you have them available from your institution or one of your subaward institutions, or you're requesting it on the budget. That is what a reviewer is looking at to say, do they have all the resources necessary to carry out the research as proposed? And so this section assesses the adequacy of the organizational resources. And that is whether it is personnel, whether it's equipment, whether it's facilities, everything of that nature that you are dedicating to a project. It also could be one of your collaborators that is providing or donating to that project. Again, that is something that would help a reviewer assess whether you have everything you need to carry out the research as proposed. Now I'd like to go into current and pending support. Now, current and pending support is very, very important section of the proposal. Many of you have heard or read in the newspapers all of the concerns on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, as well as written in articles about the whole area of research protection. So I would like to make you understand what exactly NSF uses this particular section of the proposal for. This section of the proposal is really used to assess the capacity of the individual or team to carry out the project based on all of the current and pending support that they have available. It also can be used to help assess any duplication or overlap. So what you are putting in this particular section of the proposal is all of the information on current and pending support for ongoing projects and proposals. It includes in-kind support as well. And NSF has put a lot of emphasis on developing FAQs for what types of information that has to be included in this session, in this particular section. I would like to also emphasize that it is not just all of the support that you have that goes through your institution. If, for example, you also individually receive support and it does not go through your institution, we would expect that you would identify that information on current and pending support as well. One of the changes that we just made in the last PAP guide and went into effect on October 5th is that you must use an NSF approved format to submit this information to NSF. And currently, NSF has a page available that we link to in this section of the PAP guide that identifies what are the NSF approved formats. And at the present time, the NSF approved formats for current and pending support are Science CV, which is through our colleagues at the National Library of Medicine. They have an NSF BioSketch in Science CV that you go and you fill out the information for. We also have an NSF fillable format. Both of those meet the requirement to use an NSF approved format. I should warn you that if you try to submit a proposal and have your current and pending support in other than an NSF approved format, you will not be able to submit the proposal. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Jean. And I would point to you that the current and pending support is important for us as program directors to understand also how the project that you are currently proposing connects to the other things. And as you mentioned, it's important for us to make an informed decision whether what you are suggesting is in fact overlapped and have already been supported by other things. And I would also mention that we are talking about proposal preparation, but the current pending support continues to be important even after an award is made, because it allows us to understand how the project evolves and what your commitments are with respect to the other projects. But let's stick with the proposal for this session. And the next part that I wanted to talk about is related to the special information and supplementary documentation. And this section is used for the required data management plan, for the postdoctoral mentoring plan, and other pertinent supplementary information such as letters of collaboration. The PAPG Chapter 2 has a very clear description of each of these things. And I will mention that I think that every solicitation would refer to PAPG, for example, for the data management plan or for the postdoctoral mentoring plan. And also many of them would refer directly for the letters of collaboration. However, in addition to these specific supplementary documents that you would see in almost every proposal, some solicitations may include additional requirements. So in addition to PAPG, it's very important to look at the specific solicitation to understand what other documents are expected when you submit. So letter of collaboration is an important aspect, because we are trying to ensure that when you propose activities that involve collaborators, those collaborators are aware of those activities, and also that they have committed to be part of it. And the letter should consist of a single sentence statement of collaboration, and it's taken from the PABG on this slide. If the proposal submitted and with the title is selected for funding by NSF, it is my intent to collaborate and to commit resources as detailed in the project description or the facilities, equipment, and other resources section of the proposal. So what it stated basically is that whoever signs the letter is committing to do what the rest of the proposal describes that that person is committed to do. I'm managing a solicitation that has a deadline in a few days from today, the date of the recording. And one of the common emails that I get right now is, can additional things be included in the letter of collaboration? And for this particular solicitation that refers directly to the PABG language, my answer is very simply no. And then the follow-up question from the PI is usually, but how do we explain what that collaborator is doing? And I'm not trying to be very direct, but I'm referring them exactly to the sentence that I just read. You should have described this in the project description, or you should have described this in the facilities, equipment, or other resources. So if they provide resources, they should be in the facilities. If they provide specific activities, or if they contribute to specific activities, they should be in the project description. So why are we so strict in many of these solicitations? The reason is because we are trying to avoid these letters becoming endorsement letters. That's one thing, right? So the other reason is because we are trying to prevent some PIs from circumventing the limitations in terms of the length of description of proposals. So we do not want these letters to become extensions of the proposal themselves. So what type of collaboration? You have some of the descriptions in the rest of the slide in terms of intellectual contributions to the project, permission to access a site or use of an instrument or facility, offer to furnish samples, materials for research, logistical support, evaluation services, mentoring of US students at foreign site or anywhere else. Every proposal that includes in the budget support for postdoctoral researchers must include a description of the mentoring activities that will be provided for such individuals. And again, this is a common query that I have been receiving lately in terms of what does it mean includes on the budget. And if you are looking at the budget description and looking at the budget structure, you will see there is a specific line in the budget. I think it is B1, if I remember correctly, that is the budget line in which funding support for postdoctoral scholars.
That's correct, Stefan.
Thank you, Jean. Because one of the questions that I have received is that, for example, in some cases, a postdoctoral scholar with the support from the institution may submit the proposal themselves. And in that case, a postdoctoral mentoring plan would not be required. Right? So I wanted to be very clear when it is required to submit a postdoctoral mentoring plan. But I also wanted to be very clear that a mentoring plan is really what it says. It has to be a mentoring plan. It has to be a description of the activities that the senior personnel, the PI, co-PI, and the senior researchers will provide in support of the postdoctoral scholars as they enhance their standing within the community, as they continue to enhance their ability to be active members of the scientific community. Right? So again, the proposals that identify a postdoc and do not include this mentoring plan will be prevented. So this is not that they will be returned, but you will not be able to submit the proposal through the submission mechanism. If this is a collaborative submission, multiple institutions that submit submit proposals for a single project, then a single mentoring plan would be expected for the entire collaborative project. So what type of activities are we talking about? From my graduate school and from my early career, I remember some of these, and they relate to career counseling, and we do that even with undergraduate researchers, not with postdoctoral scholars, but we go all the way to the postdoctoral researchers. Training in preparation for grant proposals. This activity is a training activity, right? So suggesting to your postdoctoral scholars to view some of these sessions will probably be valuable. training in responsible professional practices, developing publications and presentations, guidance or techniques to improve teaching and mentoring skills, counseling on how to effectively collaborate with researchers from diverse backgrounds and disciplinary areas. All these activities are valuable for professional development in the context of postdoctoral scholar context. Data management plans. Again, this is one supplementary document that you'll see in every proposal. It is described in the PABG, and every proposal is required to include a supplementary doc, a data management plan. The length is up to 2 pages. The plan should describe how the proposal will conform to the NSF policy on dissemination and sharing of research results. A valid plan may include only the statement that no detail is needed. And there are some solicitations in which, let's say if it's an instrumentation request, then such as the major research instrumentation or the MRI, in fact, the solicitation notes that if no specific data is generated just by the instrument and is generated through the projects that are enabled by the instrument, then the management of data for those projects will be left with those projects and not included in the MRI data management plan. So again, that may be acceptable, but you have to explain why you believe that nothing will be generated and nothing needs to be managed. The plan will be reviewed as part of the intellectual merit and the broader impacts of the proposal. And I have to say, I'm a computer scientist, and data in my context, in my area, may be different than what data means in Jennifer's areas and across directorates. So because of that, you will see, if you're going to the website, to the web address that you see on top of this slide, www.nsf.gov/BFA/DIAS/policy/dmp.gsp, you'll see that every directorate has separate guidance or slightly different guidance for the data management plan. And even within some directorates, some divisions may have their own different guidance for the data management plans. And this is very important to look at it. So if you remember earlier, I pointed to the solicitation information in which I said which divisions or directorates participate in a specific solicitation with funding. That is a place in which you would go back to that information and understand what type of data management plan you need to submit. So I point to you because, again, in SAIS, if you are reading the specific description for data management plan for my directorate, you'll discover that we consider software and scripts to be part of data, to be also be data and artifacts. So describing how do you manage and how do you share and how do you store software and is in fact a requirement as part of data management plans in SAIS. And I'm not that knowledgeable with respect to the other plans for the other directorates. I would assume you might find it in other places also. So I believe this is the last slide of the presentation, and I really like this motto, ask early, ask often. It is extremely important to ask questions as soon as possible, and we will use the time to answer them throughout the live session. I will point you to the additional resources, the nsf.gov staff, in case you're wondering how to find somebody that works for or with NSF. nsf.gov staff organizational list gives you a structured view of the National Science Foundation. And then, of course, something that I did not mention is that I am not a permanent staff at NSF. I'm a rotator, meaning that I'm a faculty at a university in the United States that has joined the National Science Foundation for a limited duration of time. So if you're wondering how you can do that also, you have the last link, nsf.gov, about career ops, rotators, index JSP, with a description of what it means and how you can find opportunities as rotator. And of course, there are also opportunities for permanent and federal employees. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So we have with us two of the presenters who presented this, this proposal preparation session. I'm joined by Jean Feldman, who's head of the policy office, and Jennifer Wade from Directorate for Geosciences. Stefan is not with us because, as he mentioned on his last slide, he was a rotator at NSF, and he rotated on out. So he is no longer with the National Science Foundation. However, we have two experts here who will be able to answer a number of your questions. We do have a lot of questions, and I don't believe we're going to be able to get to all of them. I don't think that's humanly possible. But we're going to go through a number of these, and hopefully, you'll get. If you don't get answers today, I'm going to put some information in the chat, which links to frequently asked questions that we have out there that exist now on our website that do answer a lot of the questions that you've put to us. So if you don't get it answered directly today, you'll have some additional resources of where to go. So let me just start by going down the list of some of these that I identified. So the first question is, when resubmitting a proposal that received positive reviews but was not funded, should we talk about it being a resubmission in the narrative, in the project description, and what should be shared with reviewers about it, or should that not be shared at all?
That is a great question, and a question I get a lot as a program director. And I think the answer will probably vary depending on who you talk to, because a lot of different programs have different requirements for this and philosophies about it. So, for example, in my program, Petrology and Geochemistry and Earth Sciences, I tend to tell people that, because it's not required in our solicitation to point it out, because every proposal that comes in is a new proposal, whether it was reviewed before or not, right? So first, let me say that every proposal is a new one. Some people, I'm one of them, but I'm not everybody, feels that when you include a section about what didn't review well the first time, it draws immediate attention to the weakness in a proposal. So I personally advise my PIs not to do it, because I think that it starts out as a flag for the reviewers. But some people really like to address what was reviewed before and how it reviewed before. So this is, as will probably be many of the answers today, talk to the program director who's handling your proposal, or who handled it the first time, and ask them what their advice is. But that's my general advice. If it really helps you make your case somehow, then great, do it. But normally I think it deters from what is a new proposal.
And I think that's a fabulous answer. And I would only add to it that the important concepts that we do treat every submission as if it is a new proposal. You may, unlike some other agencies that you may deal with, it's not like we're going to say, okay, this is a resubmission, so we're going to send it to the exact same reviewers that we did before. In fact, it's often the case that there are no overlap in the reviewers that review that proposal. So Jen's right. What you do need to do, and what to take away from this, is that you really do, even if it received great reviews, bottom line, it wasn't funded. So that means you need to address the parts of it that reviewers say, it may have fell short in this way. So that is the best advice to take, is to make sure you take what you're given back to heart and give us a proposal that reflects that.
Okay, and then following up on that, is there a limit for how many times a resubmission can occur from declined proposals?
There is no foundation-wide policy on that. What is more likely to happen, though, is that we do have, and we'll be getting this into some of the questions, geosciences, biological sciences, engineering directorate, and some programs in size that do no deadlines. And what you have to be careful of is they may place a moratorium on how long you have to wait before you could submit a proposal. But that is there isn't a foundation-wide limit on the number of resubmissions.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like in Earth Sciences, you have to wait a year before you resubmit a proposal. And that was even before, while there was deadlines, that was still true.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jean.
No, because the bottom line is what the programs want to do is to make sure that someone just isn't regurgitating the same proposal. They want you to factor in the reviews you got and really consider that when you're preparing that resubmission.
So following up on that, proposals accepted any time, how is the review process handled and what is the expected time for a decision to be announced?
So, oh, sorry, Jean.
No, I was going to say this is a great one for Jen because she is in one of the directorates that uses a no deadline policy.
Yeah, so of course, I will start by saying check with the program director for that program. But generally, we aim to have decisions made across the foundation within 6 months of submission of pretty much any proposal. That's like the agency goal, is that most of the proposals that come in, you get a decision about it in 6 months. This is a little trickier with the no deadline situation, also with the budget uncertainty that has plagued us for years. But but basically, it will, some programs will wait until they have a few proposals in and send them out in batches. We send them out for review as soon as it's in, and hold panels. So not every part of NSF does ad hoc review and panel. My program does. All of Earth Sciences does. So we'll still send it out for review and have a panel and try to get those decisions made within 6 months. But it's always good to check in with the program director and think, the 6 month rule I think is really useful. Think about the date that you would want to have money in hand, or at least know that you're going to have money in hand. Count backwards those 6 months, give yourself a little flexibility. And that's probably about when you should think about submitting a proposal.
Okay, and the next question is, how much does institutional classification, such as an R1 or R2 institution, factor into NSF funding decisions?
You do it, and then I'll follow up on it, Jen.
Okay, so in my program, and almost every program, unless it's for a very specific institution type, we want to fund a broad range, a whole portfolio of institution types, career stage, all of that goes into the decision. I want to fund lots of undergraduate institutions, all of that. So for most of the sort of quote unquote core programs, we want to fund a range of those. We don't want to just fund R1s. That is not the goal of this agency at all. So some programs are specifically targeted towards, say, community colleges or 2 or 4 year institutions, that kind of thing. But it'll say that in the solicitation. Right. But in general, we want to fund a broad portfolio of institution type.
And that is looked at throughout the review process. So that isn't just looked at by a program officer when they're making their recommendations. It's also considered by the division director as they look at that portfolio. So what this isn't meant to say, though, is that we'll take a very poorly reviewed proposal and we'll put it in the mix because these are all very highly rated proposals. And from that batch, then the program office builds that portfolio. Or unlike some other agencies, on occasion, a program officer just sees something that they believe is really worthy in a proposal. And so they'll use that as the basis and fully justifying it to make that kind of award.
The next question, as written, is how do you determine which size grant to apply for? But perhaps it's more along the lines of how does one determine your budget for a proposal? I'm trying to infer right. what the question is here.
Yeah, I didn't know what that one really meant either.
I'm guessing that I had the same interpretation, Jeremy, because it's a question I get a lot. How do I know how much money to ask for? So first, if you're looking at a solicitation or program description, it will probably tell you how much money that program has and how many awards they tend to make every year. So you can sort of rough it out that way. You should always talk to your program director again if you are curious. But that first step of looking at what's been funded before on the nsf.gov awards page and looking at the sort of budget information in the solicitation should give you a range. Some awards specifically say what the size should be, like career proposals have a minimum, right? Like there's a very specific number that you're supposed to be targeting, but for other basic core programs, they might not. So I would look there first, look at those numbers first, look at what's been supported before. At the bottom of every page, there's a little link to those awards. What's been funded recently? And you can look there. For any budget, you want to make sure that your budget is well justified in the justification, and that whatever you're asking for is commensurate with the work that you're trying to do for how long as you're trying to do it.
Because that's really the key here, is asking for what you need. Remember, you are also being reviewed by your peers, and they could tell very easily when they say, you know what, they don't need X, Y, or Z. That's the kind of research I do and what I would recommend. And they'll make comments to that effect. So people sometimes underestimate the value of a strong budget justification, because it really does say, here's how much I've asked for. And also make sure you're justifying every single category that you're asking for. It may seem obvious to you, but it's just a really valuable part of the process, is to take that very seriously and say, here's why I need to have that to do the research that I would like to conduct.
You mentioned the budget justification, and the question here is, do you include the amounts in the budget justification even though they're already in the budget?
There is no requirement that you do that. However, I've seen some very effectively do it within the context of the budget justification, to say, here's the amount, and then the description or the justification, because the budget is separated, obviously, from the budget justification. So there is no requirement, but sometimes it does help make your case.
Okay, and does NSF provide, or can NSF provide examples of successful proposals?
We cannot, but there are many places where some communities have compiled some successful proposals. You can always ask your colleagues who have been successful if they'll share them.
Yeah, that's
the best way to do it.
That's the best way to do it, because number one, even if you come and you find this fabulous proposal and you say, you've awarded this is amazing, I'd really like to see more. What we have to do then is go through a process where we redact information. It is just so much easier to say, okay, this is the PI at the institution, go and ask for it, because that's where, and the easiest way and the most rapid way of getting some successful proposals.
I would also add to that, though, too, there are a lot of things that go into deciding whether a proposal is awarded, right? Yeah. And so I just caution people who just want to see, like, I think there's a lot of value in seeing a well-written proposal and that was awarded, that because especially if you're an early career person, you kind of don't know where to start, right? But there are a lot of things that go into that decision, and you don't always know which parts of that proposal were the best parts and the worst parts. I caution a little bit against that. I think it's important to also take whatever the reviews were of that proposal and read those too, because that will tell you a lot about what worked well and what didn't. And yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Well, I mean, it's the old story of, we used to put examples of broader impacts out there and did pages and pages. And what we found was people, instead of being truly creative about how they wanted to do their broader impacts, they just went through the laundry list of what NSF suggested as examples. That's really, it's all based on the research that you're doing, and it's got to make sense in the context of that research. So Jen's point is very well taken on that question.
And the last thing I want to add to this is, I think especially if you're just starting out in the NSF system, whether you're early career or not, best way to see proposals is to contact the program director and volunteer to be a reviewer.
To review, yes.
So first of all, we need reviewers all the time, but it's such a good, then you will see, you are handed a proposal, you're asked to review it, you're given the review criteria for whatever that program is. Being a reviewer tells you a lot about what a program's looking for, and it gives you access to these proposals. So please be a reviewer. It's good for you and it's good for us.
And I know we're 3:30.
We've got time. We've got 15 minutes until the session is over. So
so sorry, I had a wrong number.
That's okay.
I thought I was leaving at 3:30.
We're going to answer 75 questions in the next 15 minutes.
We can do it. We can do it.
But if for those that were asked on current and pending support, we do have another session that's going to go over that in probably a lot of detail. So we may not get those as part of this session. We may hold those.
That's fine. And I did drop into the chat a link to the current and pending support FAQs that we have. So we'll go down to the next most famous or pertinent question, which is salary. So we got a lot of questions about PI salary. So I would just read the question here saying, assuming I have 2 awards pending that request more than 2 months salary, what happens in the event that they're both funded? Can they rebudget that salary, or does NSF cut that off?
No, I mean, the bottom line is the official policy is 2 months in any 1 year across all NSF funded awards, unless you put it in the budget and it comes out as part of the approved budget. So whatever you are approved for by the program officer, you get a copy of the budget when you get an award. And yes, you could rebudget those funds after that time. But the reality is the budgeting aspect of 2 months is for the proposal preparation and award. We always go and allow rebudgeting once an award is made, unless there is a change in objective or scope.
Well, and often what happens too, if I'm about to make an award, one of the things I'll do is go see, if I see that there are other pending awards, I'll go see what they are. I might reach out to that program director and be like, hey, are you planning to do this? How should we talk to each other all the time. So we can also work some of that out prior to award as well.
Right. But that's the fallacy of current and pending support. Current and pending support is what you're actually think you're going to take to do that project versus the 2 months issue. They're kind of 2 separate issues in many ways.
Yeah.
But program officers do talk to one another. You should know that as well.
Question asks, is there a format for letters of intent, or does it vary by, I would say, by program?
Well, there is basic guidance in the LOI section of the PAP guide on what we typically ask for. And usually the kinds of things they're asking are PI and co-PI's names, their institution, a brief summary of what you think you're going to do. That helps us. What do we use the LOI for? To help us understand the volume of proposals that's coming in, as well as to prepare for the review process. So, I mean, there are a few you see where they ask for something a little different, but that's the basic information that is typically asked for in an LOI.
Okay, and this question is asking, can you address including food costs in your budget? And I'm gonna assume that they're talking about perhaps a conference proposal.
Yeah, well, that's actually the place in the PAP guide where food comes up. And it's pretty caveated, that language. So you're going to find it in the PAP guide in the conference section under meals and coffee breaks. But the overall answer, just to make folks clear, is that you can include for a conference proposal, you can include meals that are integral and necessary to as part of that conference. So there are often working meetings if you continue the session and everybody eats and stuffs their face, but they're continuing the discussion as well. They obviously have to be reasonable and consistent for what you would charge for a like cost if your institution was holding a conference. But I would recommend that you go through and look at that language, because there's some very detailed information there.
Okay, this is also a budget question. Does a graduate research assistant salary fall into personnel, and what are their constraints or rules surrounding that? Yeah,
well, they are not on the senior personnel. But usually what we're asking for in terms of graduate students, even postdocs for that matter, is the number of students and the amount. So that is basically what is factored into that as part. If they are on the personnel part of a budget. We also, it gets a little complicated because we also have participants, and that could be students that fall under participant support. but that is a little different than I think what you're talking about here, if I understand what you're asking correctly.
Okay, this is a question. I'm going to try and summarize this here, that the person has encountered some NSF program officers limiting a salary figure for PIs in certain departments. They're wondering if NSF is this okay by NSF? Is there policy behind this, since NSF does not allow cost sharing?
Oh, Jean,
Yeah.
I'm leaving that to you.
Yeah, well, it is not, okay, I have to try to do this without insulting the program officers who did this. So the overall foundation position is you should be charging us what it is that cost. And the problem with arbitrarily limiting compensation is that you will have to put that, or you typically would put that amount on the budget. And that would make it voluntary committed cost sharing, and that's prohibited by NSF policy. So the overall foundation policy is that we don't arbitrarily set limits. Now, what we sometimes do is say we will pay direct costs up to a certain amount, plus if you have any overhead on top of that. But it is not our practice to state, how much we expect people to get paid at a given institution.
And I will just add, there are times where someone may submit a proposal for $300,000, but I only have $280,000. So there may be some back and forth about budget adjustments that need to be made to get to that number. Now, I agree with Jean, there's nowhere to say like, this is exactly the category you should be changing for all of these reasons. But more broadly, this isn't directly what they're asking, but I just wanted to point out that sometimes there is some back and forth about the budget depending on what money there is available in a program.
So I will add on to that in those cases, though, typically what should be happen is the program will give you a bottom line figure and say, okay, I just don't have $300,000. So give me a budget letting me know what can be done with that amount of money, and we'll take it from there. So, but it's typically not, unless the review process specifically really slams certain costs as really not necessary for the research that you're going to do.
Right.
But typically it's just as Jen said, you wanted 300, I just don't have 300 and I'd love to fund you. So tell me what you can do and take it from there. And then that's a revised budget that must be submitted by the authorized organizational representative.
Okay. If we include a subaward for a foreign collaborator, may they be listed as a co-PI?
If you do that, so remember that NSF, in terms of its eligibility requirements, talks about either subawards to foreign organizations or consulting arrangements to foreign individuals. And if you are using making a subaward to a foreign organization or the consulting arrangement, there are extra justifications that have to occur as part of the proposal explaining why it can't be done here or for whatever reason. But there is nothing to specify that they cannot be a PI or a co-PI, and they often are.
Okay. Is a postdoc mentoring plan needed if the PI or co-PI is a postdoc?
The answer is technically no, because they are serving as the PI in that capacity. And the postdoc mentoring plan was truly envisioned as postdocs working under a PI and co-PI at their institution. So
that
no,
said, few program directors would be sad if one was included, because we are very, we do want to make sure that postdoc is mentored well, but it is not required.
Mm-mm. Not when they're serving as the PI or co-PI.
Okay. Can you comment on how NSF uses the collaborators and other affiliations information?
It's simple. It's used to manage the review process. It is a single copy document, and it is helping us ensure that we have a strong merit review process that looks to see that the individuals who are conflicted unnecessarily as part of the process are not serving as reviewers wherever we can do so.
Okay. How specifically does the program officer approve an exception for going beyond the 2-month salary limit?
Jen, I'll let you have that one.
Yeah, this really varies. It starts with an email to the program director explaining why you want to go over it, and then having a conversation about whether it is appropriate or not. That's basically, so it starts with an email.
Okay. If an investigator on a proposed research team is deemed to have too many other commitments as seen through the current and pending support, will the whole proposal be rejected or declined, or will it be sufficient to replace that one PI or co-PI?
Yeah, that's another very specific sort of case by case question. Depends on the project, depends on the goals of the program. It depends on a lot of things. So that program director will, if that's like the one thing that's holding up a project, they'll start a conversation about it. That's a very specific case to answer.
But I think what you're hearing from both Jen and myself is that there really is, once you get to that budget negotiation stage, there is a lot of back and forth that is required and necessary. So it is ask early, ask often. Well, we may be asking early and often at that stage as well.
Okay, the next one is states that program descriptions seem to be a lot less specific than a program solicitation. How can we make our proposals to program descriptions, I guess, more competitive when they don't have the same type of detailed information on what reviewers are looking for that might be stated in a program solicitation?
Yeah, that could be for a lot of reasons. So it could be that the program is really broad, and so they welcome a big range of projects. If you're writing something and you're uncertain about what your boundary conditions are or what to focus on, again, I should have this tattooed on me. Talk to your program director. Is there something that you're missing? I also, again, really encourage you, even at the bottom of those program description pages is a link to what's been funded before. Take a look at those, and that will really give you a sense of scope for what that program has supported in the past.
Okay, we have a lot of questions that we're just not going to get to, and we've come to the end of our time here. But I do want to thank you for joining us today. Please do look at the FAQs that I posted in the chat for proposal preparation and award administration. I hope that you'll be able to come to a number of other sessions this week. There will be 2 more sessions this afternoon, and they are concurrent sessions. So at 4:30 Eastern Time, there will be 2 concurrent sessions. One will cover the Directorate for Education and Human Resources, and the other will cover the Directorate for Mathematical and Physical Sciences. So please check the agenda for this afternoon and for the rest of the week. We thank you, and we hope you have a wonderful day and rest of the week. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.